What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabro. So in this video, we're going to go over our NFL power rankings from Week 9. So now that Week 9 is finished and over with, we are going to go over our top 10 teams in the NFL at this current moment in time. We'll start at number 10 and then work our way down to number 1. So at number 10, I have the New England Patriots. So the Patriots beat the Carolina Panthers by the score of 24-6 last week. And the Patriots, this is the first time that they've actually been in the top 10 of our power rankings so far. And I think it's well deserved because they've been on a winning streak the last few weeks. But really the point of emphasis that I'm taking away from this game was their defense. They played a phenomenal game against Carolina from beginning to end. They were able to force 3 interceptions off of Sam Darnold. One of them was returned for a touchdown by J.C. Jackson. And this was Christian McCaffrey's first game back from injury in a couple weeks, and I imagine Carolina really wanted him to get going against that Patriots defense, but the Patriots did a solid job of containing him throughout the entire game. I mean, to be able to hold Carolina to 6 points of offense and really keeping them off the board and not getting really any sort of consistency as far as offensive drives throughout the entire game, you got to give them a lot of respect. And even though that I didn't think that Mac Jones had his best game, he was able to get some drives going, especially late in the first half, that was able to extend the lead for the Patriots, and then it was just kind of more of the same in the second half. So this is really a team where obviously the offense is still kind of figuring things out with Mac Jones. He's still getting comfortable with what it's like in the NFL through the first half of the season, but he's shown some flashes to me where I think he's going to be a solid quarterback moving forward. But really, this team is going to rely on its defense to kind of carry them until the offense can really get it going with Mac Jones. But well-deserved win. They're only a half game back of the Buffalo Bills at the top of the AFC East. So this AFC East race may get pretty interesting as time moves on. But I had the Patriots at the number 10 spot this week. So at number 9, I have the Denver Broncos. Denver put probably one of the biggest shocks of Week 9 against the Dallas Cowboys, beating them by the score of 30-16. This was a game where Kevin and I really thought that Dallas was going to walk through this game and beat Denver pretty convincingly. But Denver was absolutely impressive in this game. It got so bad for Dallas that they were losing this game at home 30-0 at one point. So you got to give Denver a lot of credit for being able to go on the road, playing top tier football against arguably one of the best teams in the NFC and shocking the NFL, because I thought Teddy Bridgewater looked good. I thought Javonte Williams out of the backfield was an absolute nightmare for Dallas's defense. And that Denver defense threw Dallas off the entire game. Dak Prescott could not get into any sort of consistent rhythm. And when Denver got up early in the game, it forced Dallas to go away from the run game. And that's really Dallas's bread and butter at this point. You know, they like running the ball extremely efficiently with Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard. And when you take that element out of the game, it really did put the advantage towards Denver in that regard. And Denver took full advantage of it. So big win for Denver. It keeps them alive at the top of the AFC West. They're really in the mix for the top spot at the AFC West at this current moment in time. It really just kind of goes to show how competitive that division is. So definitely keep an eye out for Denver. Denver's a good team. And this win over Dallas, I think, proves that, because I don't think a lot of people were expecting this win over Dallas in this matchup. So got to give them credit for that. And that's why I have them at number 9. So number 8, I have the Buffalo Bills. The Bills lost to the Jaguars 9-6 in this game. And I just have to say this. It's unacceptable. This is not a game that they should have lost. This is a game where, to be quite honest with you, Buffalo should have won this game by possibly 2 or 3 touchdowns. Jacksonville is not that good of a team. And to score 6 points against arguably one of the worst teams in the NFL, it's just flat out unacceptable. And the Bills last week were at the number 6 spot in our power rankings. And I had them as the top team in the AFC at that moment in time. To be quite honest with you, I was really thinking of not even having them in the top 10 just because of how disgusting this loss was to the Jaguars. And Josh Allen said it best. They did not play well in this game in his post-game press conference after this loss to the Jaguars. I mean, defensively, they were fine. They held Jacksonville to 3 field goals. So the defense did their job. Their offense just had a tire fire of a game. And I was really quite surprised at how bad that Bills offense looked against Jacksonville. I thought that Jacksonville would just kind of fold in this game because the Bills are just that good of a team. But no, Jacksonville came to play, and they probably provided the most shocking upset of the entire season, to be quite honest with you. So the Jaguars deserve credit, but man, the Bills, I'm extremely critical of them in this game because this is a game that they should have won. They're on a pretty easy stretch, and they just had a bad game. There's no other way to say it. They play the Jets next week, so hopefully they get back on track. But yeah, I mean, this was a terrible loss for the Bills, and it allowed New England to kind of get back into the conversation as far as being competitive for the top spot in the AFC East. So, this was a game that the Bills should have won, but they let it slip, and now they're only a half game up against the Patriots for the top of the AFC East. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes moving forward, and that's why I have them at number 8 in our power rankings. So number 7, I have the Dallas Cowboys. Like I mentioned, they lost to the Broncos 30-16 earlier, and this was a game where I really thought that Dallas was going to continue its momentum that it's really been on throughout the entire season. Before this game, the only game that they had lost throughout the entire season was the first game of the year when they lost to the Buccaneers on a field goal at the end of the game. They only lost that game by 2 points. Dallas has been one of the most consistent teams throughout the entire season. And with Dak back in the lineup after having that calf issue that he was dealing with the last couple weeks or so, I thought it would have just been back to normal and the offense would have been firing on all cylinders against Denver, but that did not prove to be the case. I really think when I look back at this game, Dallas going for it on 4th down on back-to-back possessions and not converting on those 4th down opportunities really kind of set them behind, because even if they had been able to convert one of those 4th downs, you're potentially talking about adding, possibly a touchdown, or even if they hadn't gone for those 4th downs, because one of those 4th downs was in the red zone, you could have settled for a field goal and at least get on the board, but they wanted to be a little bit aggressive and it backfired on them. And I just thought that that offense from the Cowboys, they just couldn't get into a rhythm whatsoever until literally the end of the game. So give credit to Denver's defense. They played outstanding football against Dallas, but Dallas, they just looked bad. Dak Prescott looked rusty because at one point he had only completed 6 out of 20 passes. And granted, he finished the game, I think, somewhere around like 19 of like 38, completed about maybe 50% of his passes. But yeah, it was a bad game overall from Dallas. And this is probably one of their first games where they've looked this bad throughout the entire year. Even in that loss against the Buccaneers, they did not look that bad. But this was probably the worst game of the year. And, Dallas is still at the top of the NFC East. So I'm not worried about their positioning in that division. But, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board, figure out what went wrong, and then just get it back next week. So I'm not worried about the Cowboys. I think they'll be a good team moving forward, but this was a bad loss against Denver, and that's why I have them at number 7. So at number 6, I have the Baltimore Ravens. So the Ravens beat the Vikings in overtime last week, and it was kind of an up and down game for the Ravens. There were points where it looked like the Vikings may have taken control of the game, but the Ravens were able to establish some consistency in the fourth quarter. They were able to take the lead, but they ended up giving it up before the end of the fourth quarter. That sent the game into overtime, and then Lamar Jackson was able to lead the Ravens down the field for a game-winning Justin Tucker field goal that gave them the win. So when I look at the Ravens, though, really Lamar Jackson is just carrying this team single-handedly on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, when you look at Lamar, he should be at the top of the MVP discussion because he's just single-handedly carrying that offense. I mean, he had 120 yards rushing to go along with almost throwing for 275 yards against Minnesota. And it really kind of is Lamar Jackson or die when it comes to Baltimore's offense. And that may be somewhat of an issue moving forward just because you're relying on one guy to really do it all on that side of the ball. But the guy's just having a phenomenal year, and I imagine it'll continue unless some defenses figure out a way to slow him down. But a lot of teams have failed in that regard at this point. So got to give credit to Lamar for just continuing the phenomenal season that he's having this year. I mean, the Ravens are sitting at 6-2. They're at the top of the AFC North, but that division is extremely competitive because the three teams that are behind them in the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Browns are all vying for that top spot. And really, the Steelers have been on a surge the last couple of weeks. The Browns and the Bengals have been up and down, but you can never count them out just because these divisional matchups in the AFC North, they're always fun, but they're always gritty. So Baltimore, I think if they just continue their winning ways and just stick with keeping Lamar Jackson upright and letting him just carry that offense, I think it will result in more wins. But I would like to see, the run game get a little bit more consistent with Le'Veon Bell and Devontae Freeman, just to kind of take some of the pressure off of Lamar Jackson in that regard. But they play the Dolphins and the Bears in the next couple games, so the opportunities for the Ravens to continue their winning ways, they're there for the taking. And that's why I have them at number 6 in the power rankings. So number 5, I have the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams lost to the Titans this past week, and I have to say this was probably one of the worst games that I've seen the Rams play the entire year. And it was probably one of Matt Stafford's, if not his worst performance of the entire season. He threw 2 interceptions on back-to-back plays in the first half, and the second one resulted in a pick 6, and it really just turned the momentum away from LA completely and put it all towards Tennessee in that moment. And really, those turnovers, it set them back for the rest of the game, and they just couldn't dig themselves out of the hole that they dug themselves in the first half. And this was despite the fact that I thought Tennessee had a difficult time really getting into any sort of rhythm consistently on the offensive side of the ball. This was the first game that the Titans did not have Derrick Henry in the backfield, and really the first game that we get to see where can Ryan Tannehill lead the way. And the Rams really couldn't do much against Ryan Tannehill, and that was despite the fact that I didn't even think that he had that good of a game, but they were still able to get 28 points on the Rams. So at least they were doing some things right. But the Rams, they just had a bad game in this one. Really both sides of the ball. They gave up 21 points defensively. The other 7 was that pick 6, but that offense, which has been a high-flying offense the entire year, was only able to score 16 points. And I have to kind of say it at this point, the Titans don't have that good of a defense, but with some of the games that they've been playing, I may have to kind of change that stance because they've been able to slow down some high-powered offenses. And the Rams were just another one of those teams that did struggle against this Tennessee defense, against this Tennessee defense. So when I look at the Rams, though, they're still a top 5 team in the league, but they looked bad against the Titans. And, they play the 49ers next week, so that should be a win for them. And then they play the Packers after their bye week in week 12. In week 12. So the Rams are still a good team, but this was a bad loss against the Titans. So, you take the loss in stride, and they have to kind of keep winning their games, though, if they want to stay competitive in the NFC West, because the Cardinals are just rolling, even despite the fact that they didn't have Kyler Murray last week. So I got the Rams at 5, and I still believe that they're a top 5 team moving forward. So at number 4, I have the Buccaneers. So the Buccaneers were on a bye week this past week, and when I look at the Buccaneers moving forward, though, they have a pretty easy upcoming schedule for themselves. They play Washington on the road next week in week 10, and then they play the Giants after that. So their chances are looking pretty good for some wins after their bye week here. And when I look at Tom Brady, you have to kind of consider him at the top of the MVP leaderboard at this current moment in time. The guy is leading the league in passing yards. He's top 5 as far as touchdowns goes. And really, no team has really been able to kind of find a way to slow him down. We did see them really kind of struggle against the Saints before their bye week. But even with that said, Tom Brady had 4 touchdowns in that game. He had 3 interceptions, which was probably, his worst game of the year as far as his performances go. But still, 4 touchdowns. The guy is still slinging it at 44 years old. I want to see whether or not that Rob Gronkowski is going to be able to come back in this upcoming game against Washington. He has been dealing with some rib issues the past month and a half or so. I don't believe that Antonio Brown is coming back anytime soon. Bruce Arians did provide an update a couple days ago saying that he's still in a walking boot, so I wouldn't expect AB to come back anytime soon. But really, the biggest point for the Buccaneers moving forward is just try to get healthy. That secondary is still dealing with some injury issues on the back end, so hopefully that bye week was able to get some guys rested and get them ready for this matchup against Washington. But, the Buccaneers are a top 5 team. They lead the way in the NFC South, but they do kind of have to watch out for the Saints because the Saints have looked somewhat decent the last couple weeks. But, I still think that the Bucs have a favorable advantage over the Saints, despite the fact that they lost that divisional matchup to them just a couple weeks ago. But I have the Bucs at number 4, and I think they deserve to be there. So number 3, I have the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers lost to the Chiefs by the score of 13-7, and this was without Aaron Rodgers. So this was kind of a result that I was expecting as far as the loss goes. But I wasn't expecting that this Green Bay defense was going to hold the Kansas City Chiefs to 13 points. So Green Bay's defense, despite not having Aaron Rodgers on the other side of the ball, I thought that Packers defense played up to snuff and really put Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense into a bind the entire game. So I know Jordan Love, that was his first start going against the Chiefs last week. And, he wasn't really effective in any way, shape, or form. He was able to lead them on that one touchdown drive in the fourth quarter. But before then, I mean, they looked really bad on the offensive side of the ball. He wasn't really able to get them in any sort of offensive consistency whatsoever. And it just kind of showed his youth and inexperience at this point. So, that was kind of the experiment with Jordan Love, and it didn't really work out. And it really kind of shows how reliant this team is with Aaron Rodgers at the helm. So, they get him back this week. They play the Seahawks this Sunday, and then they play the Vikings after that. So these are some winnable games for Green Bay, but this will also be Russell Wilson's first game back from injury when the Seahawks go up against the Packers. So this may actually be a more competitive game for Green Bay than what they were initially anticipating. But I still think that this is a winnable game for the Packers moving forward. The Packers are still one of the top teams in the NFC and the NFL as a whole. So they did take a step back. I had them as the number 1 team last week after they beat the Cardinals on the road, but they take a step back to the number 3 spot, and that's why I have them there. So number 2, I have the Tennessee Titans. The Titans had an impressive performance against the Los Angeles Rams, beating them by the score of 28-16, this past Sunday night. And this was their first game without Derrick Henry, and this was the first game where we really got to see just how good would this team be moving forward without Derrick Henry, which is probably one of the most impactful players on any team throughout the NFL. And offensively, they had some issues, but they were able to put up 21 points against that Rams defense. They got the other 7 from the pick 6 by Kevin Byard, but they did enough to win. And this may be a situation where I don't know if Ryan Tannehill is going to be like a gunslinger putting up, 350, 400 yards passing for the Titans. I mean, he's got the wideouts to do that with A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. I know Julio Jones has been dealing with some injury issues, but, Ryan Tannehill can definitely do some pretty solid things moving forward for that Titans offense. But really, I think what's going to happen is that this Titans team is going to have to rely on their defense. And their defense, I have to give them credit. In these big games that they've been playing against, I mean, they have really stepped up. I mean, outside of the Buffalo game where they gave up over 30, they were able to hold the Rams to 16 points. They held the Chiefs to 16 points. They held the Chiefs to 3 points, And this is despite the fact that I don't think the Titans defense is that good, but they are stepping up when they need to, and they are making plays on that side of the ball. So, they're currently sitting at 7-2 in the AFC South. They have a 3-game lead over the Indianapolis Colts. So I don't expect the Colts to really kind of get back into competition as far as the top spot for the AFC South goes, unless the Titans just completely fall apart without Derrick Henry in the fold. But, the Titans are at the number 2 spot. I think this is the highest team from any team in the AFC that I've had in my power rankings so far, and I have them at number 2. And I mean, they beat the Rams, who were a top 5 team and are still a top 5 team in the NFL at this current moment in time. So I got to give the Titans credit. Going on the road to beat a team like LA, when I thought that LA would just kind of cruise through that game, I got to give the Titans respect for that, and I have them at number 2 because of that. So at number 1, they get back to that number 1 spot once again, and that is the Arizona Cardinals. They beat the 49ers by the score of 31-17. And I think the most impressive part about this win for the Cardinals was that they were able to win this game without Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, and AJ Green. When you're missing 3 crucial pieces on that side of the ball with the offense, I would kind of expect that, it may just not be in the cards for the Cardinals against the 49ers. But I have to say, Colt McCoy stepped in for Kyler, and I thought Colt McCoy did a phenomenal job of leading that offense. I mean, for God's sakes, they put up 31 points as a team. And Colt McCoy, he didn't throw for 400 yards passing, but he still threw for about 250 yards passing. And I thought he was relatively efficient. He only had 4 incompletions the entire game. So, got to give credit to Colt McCoy. I haven't really seen Colt McCoy in a starting role that much throughout the last 10 years or so. And even despite that, I thought he played really well. And to go along with that, I thought they got good production out of the run game as well. Chase Edmonds had a solid game, despite the fact that he did get hurt. I thought James Conner had a really good game. He almost had 100 yards rushing. And defensively, they were able to hold that 49ers offense to 17 points. And to be able to do that on the road, I got to give them credit for that. So, Arizona, the top of the NFC West, they've been one of the best teams, if not the best team for most of the season so far. And once they get Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, and AJ Green back, I think they will stay there unless some team knocks them off. But, realistically, this team is one play away from being undefeated still, had AJ Green and Kyler Murray not miscommunicated on that one pass play against Green Bay that resulted in a game-losing interception. So, the Cardinals have been the dominant team as far as my number 1 spot goes for our power rankings so far. And, once again, they find themselves at the top of the pecking order in our power rankings. So with that said, you guys, that'll wrap it up for me. If you guys like the video, hit that like button below. If you guys want to support the channel in any way, shape, or form, hit that subscribe button below. Any sort of support that we can give for the channel, Kevin and I definitely appreciate it. Once again, just thank you guys for checking out the video, and we'll see you guys later.